An explosion, like a gunshot, erupted outside the window. I jumped up in bed, my wife Elsie rising a split second later. A black silhouette in the dim moonlight trickling through the windows. As she flew up into a sitting position, her forehead smashed directly into the center of my nose. I gave a sharp cry of pain, instinctively pulling back and grabbing at my face. The slight taste of blood in the back of my throat like tangy iron. My eyes watered, the feeling of a hot pincer driven into my nasal cavity instantly bringing me to full wakefulness. "Watch out!" I hissed through gritted teeth as she flicked on the bedside lamp. "God, Jesus, that hurt." Someone outside started screaming, a gurgling shriek that seemed to go on and on. It sounded so guttural, so panicked and agonized that I couldn't even tell if it was the scream of a man or a woman. I could barely tell if the thing was human at all. Still rubbing my nose, I flung the blanket off us, revealing Ellie's long, shapely legs stretching across the bed. "It sounded like a bomb just went off," Elsie said, brushing a strand of blonde hair from in front of her tired eyes, the shadows of crow's feet hanging darkly underneath. I knew I probably didn't look any better. The last couple of days had been stressful to say the least. I jumped out of bed, staggering over to the window, not knowing what new horror to expect now. Directly in front of the house, 2 cars lay twisted and shredded beyond recognition. Even through the window, I smelled the faint odor of gasoline and burning metal. I could see the gas puddling under the cars, spurting out of the ruptured lines. Amidst the airbags and shattered glass, I couldn't see anyone in the front seats. I could still hear that shrieking gurgle coming from one of the vehicles, as though it had rapidly grown weaker and lower in pitch. "Elsie, call the police." I started to yell, when an eruption of sound and light shook the wooden floors beneath my bare feet. One of the cars exploded into flames, sending burning metal shrapnel flying in every direction. The fuel puddling underneath the racks instantly ignited. A split second later, a wall of fire entombed both vehicles. I turned away, still seeing an eerie negative image of the flames behind my closed eyelids. The screaming had stopped, cut off at the fatal moment. The abrupt silence coming from the destroyed cars felt oppressive and thick. I tried to clear my eyes, blinking quickly against the film of tears that made the world appear underwater. Behind me, the door to our bedroom suddenly flew open, slamming against the wall. I gave a startled cry. Our 5-year-old daughter, Rachel, stood there, her small face showing an identical expression of dismay and uncertainty as Elsie's. She looked like a tiny version of my wife, even wearing similar white pajamas on her thin frame. The reddish light from the fires outside flickered across Rachel's pale face, shell-shocked and silent. Like her mother, Rachel's eyes were wide and staring, the pupils dilated with fear. "Oh my God," Elsie whispered from her bed, her voice a hoarse rasp of terror. I glanced over at her, seeing that she had her smartphone pressed tightly to her ear. The blood seemed to drain out of her face as she absorbed the words on the other end. Glancing quickly from me to Rachel, she put the phone down on the bed, pressing the speaker button so we could all hear what she had. A calm, robotic female voice read out the following message.
"Your town is now considered a federal emergency zone under Executive Order 717. All local and state emergency services are temporarily suspended until further notice. Please stay in your homes and obey the following rules. Number 1. Do not answer the door for anyone, unless they have a leather FEMA badge with a silver skull on the back. Authentic federal agents will be wearing tactical gear and carrying oxygen tanks. If they do not look authentic, do not let them in under any circumstances. Number 2. Keep all windows and doors closed and locked. Seal every entrance to your home from external contamination that you can. Number 3. Do not drink or use the water for any purpose. Number 4. If any member of your household begins to show signs of hallucinations, psychosis, or delusions, lock them in a separate area immediately. Cease all interactions with the affected individual. The United States government is here to help you. Medical aid is on the way. Please remain calm and do not go outside of your current location. Follow any and all orders from legitimate FEMA personnel. Stay indoors. Stay safe. We will release more information to you as it becomes available. Your town is now considered a federal emergency zone.
The emotionless female voice said again, repeating the message on an endless loop. Elsie pressed a trembling finger against the screen, ending the call. "It's getting worse," Elsie whispered, her voice saturated with dread and hopelessness. Her eyes seemed to look through me rather than at me, as if she had already given up. "Damn it, Jay. It's getting worse and worse." My head felt too heavy. I closed my eyes, trying not to let her nihilism infect my own mind, remembering back to when this began. Yesterday morning, I had put Rachel in the backseat of my little Toyota sedan and started off on my way to drop her off at kindergarten. I had to arrive at work by 8:45 a.m., but I always gave myself extra time. I hated rushing. The chill morning air smelled of the first traces of spring, a blue sky loaded with puffy clouds stretched out all around our small town. I inhaled deeply, excited to see the winter and endless snow finally receding north for another year. After making sure Rachel was buckled safely in place, I got into the driver's seat, taking a long sip from the steaming hot mug of coffee I just brewed before gently placing it into the cup holder. "Daddy, it smells weird today," Rachel said, her voice high and questioning. "It's like a dirty fish tank. Smells bad. I don't like it at all." I sniffed the air, but I noticed absolutely nothing except the faint odor of car exhaust and the fragrant steam rising from the coffee. "You mean when you got in the car?" I said, starting the engine and backing out into our little quiet cul-de-sac. Only 3 other houses lay along it, each plot separated by a thin line of evergreens and oak trees that had been there before the street even existed. I checked the rearview mirror, seeing Rachel wrinkle her tiny nose in disgust. "Nah, I smelled it since I woke up, but it was worse outside. It's not strong like your cologne," she continued, holding her pink backpack in front of her chest like a fluorescent shield. I rolled my eyes, making my tone sound artificially hurt. "Honey, I barely even used any cologne today," I said. "I can barely even smell it, and I don't notice anything fishy. Either you have a nose like a bloodhound, or..." I turned right onto River Road, heading towards the local school. The street curved along our town's saltwater reservoir, dotted with a few restaurants and gas stations amidst the rolling hills thick with trees. Soft waves rippled across the surface of the lake, the clean, clear water reflecting the idyllic sky above. Further down the road, I saw the flashing of emergency lights. Frowning, I slowed down, going around the next turn when I saw dozens of police cars parked along the side of the road. A few dozen feet down a long, sandy beach gave us an unobstructed view of the reservoir. "What's that? What's going on? Do you think there was a killer, like in those movies you don't let me watch?" Rachel asked, struggling against her seatbelt to lean forward as much as she could. I exhaled a long, irritated sigh. I knew the babysitter let her watch whatever trash Rachel felt like, and we had come home on more than one occasion to see her watching old black and white zombie movies. "I have no idea, honey," I said. "What now? It's a good thing we left early today at least. If it's not one thing, it's another, I swear." I came to a full stop in front of a state flagger in an orange safety vest holding up a sign. He stared lazily past my car. I glanced over at the reservoir, seeing police boats with flashing lights swarming like hungry piranhas towards a spot on the border of the beach. More cops on the shoreline, radios in hand. In between them, I saw a bloated, purplish body floating face down in the water. It looked like the skinny naked body of an old woman, the wet flesh hideously disfigured and swollen close to the bursting point. "Oh my god, Daddy, there's a woman in there," Rachel screamed, rolling down the window to point and jump up and down excitedly against the lap belt. I think she's dead. Whoa, that's neat. That's not neat at all, Rachel. That's terrible. How would you feel if... I started to say, until a brief honk cut me off. My head flicked forward. The state worker had flipped the sign around so that it read, "Slow now." Behind me, a dozen other cars and trucks waited impatiently. I slowly accelerated, keeping an eye on the excitement in the lake as I carefully veered around the flagger. Moving as slowly as I could, I saw the police pulling the old woman's body out and flipping it onto a black stretcher laying in the sand at the edge of the water. As I glimpsed her face, though, I gasped, a deep sense of revulsion twisting in my stomach. Thousands of thin black spikes jutted out of her skin, reminding me of the needles of a sea urchin. But it looked like they had somehow grown out from inside her, covering her neck, chin, and forehead in thick clusters. Her limp head rolled over to face us, the wide, staring eyes having turned fully black. Even in death, those eyes made it look like she was looking directly at me. "Oh my god, what is that?" Rachel shrieked, totally losing her composure as she too beheld a glimpse of the dead woman's face. Swearing under my breath, I sped up. Within seconds, we lost sight of the beach when a grove of old maple trees fully blocked the police boats and dead body from view. But every time I closed my eyes for the rest of that day, I always saw that old woman's cold, dead face with obsidian eyes. A few minutes later, I pulled up to Rachel's school, expecting to see a line of cars and a gaggle of teachers standing outside. But only a few cars of parents sat idling outside. State troopers and police cars covered the parking lot. In the corner, I saw unmarked black SUVs. A circle of men with polished leather shoes and freshly ironed black suits stood, their heads lowered confidentially as they were whispering secrets to each other. I saw Rachel's teacher, Maria Nightingale. We had been in the same grade. I remembered her as a shy, soft-spoken girl in high school, and fundamentally, her personality hadn't changed much since then. She walked briskly up to the car, giving a tight, tense smile before lightly knocking on my window. "Miss Nightingale?" Rachel asked inquisitively from the backseat. I rolled down my window. "Hi Jay, and Rachel too. I'm sorry to tell you guys this on such short notice, but school is closed due to an emergency. We tried to call your house, but apparently we just missed you guys. You're not the only ones though, don't worry." She gave a short, robotic bark of laughter at that. I frowned. "What kind of emergency?" I asked. "This is pretty sudden, Maria. I'm supposed to be at work soon. You guys have my cell phone number. I don't understand why you wouldn't. Look, it's been really hectic here. I'm sorry that we didn't get a hold of you earlier. It's just that." Her eyes watered, her face seeming to fall, its rigid mask disappearing in an instant. Underneath, I just saw sadness and uncertainty. "Well, there's been some loss of life. It came very suddenly." "You mean that old lady in the reservoir?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Maria just stared at me blankly, and I quickly realized she had no idea what I was talking about. "Okay, maybe not. So what kind of loss of life?" "Two of our students lost their lives this morning. It looks like their mother might have been involved. I don't know if I should say anything specific in front." Maria motioned to Rachel with a quick stab of her chin. "But it doesn't look good. It was the two Greca boys. It looks like their mother burned the house down, and sadly, the children were inside. And you know, my brother's a cop. Just got promoted last month actually. He was one of the first ones to respond. He said Mrs. Greca was rambling about how her children were demons wearing human disguises, and that she had to do it to stop the apocalypse, or some such nonsense. He says it looks like she drilled the doors shut from the outside before lighting it on fire. Can you imagine?" Rachel gasped. "Miss Nightingale? Do you mean Mark and Benny Greca?" Rachel asked, her voice too innocent and light for such a horrible conversation. I remembered seeing the children briefly before when their mother dropped them off at school or during PTA meetings. They were identical twins in Rachel's class. The police ordered us to shut the school down for today. The principal got a call from the governor. I don't know if it's just about the kids or what, and they refused to tell us any details. I'm so sorry about the inconvenience. I know you're on your way to work and all, Maria said, her tanned face looking sadder by the moment. I felt responsible somehow. Look, it's not your fault. I'm sorry, Maria. I know you guys are doing your best here, but there were a bunch of cops on River Road too, and it looked like they were fishing a dead woman out of the lake. Is this entire town falling apart at once or something? I asked, huffing as I turned my car back on. I really need to get to work though, and if I have to bring Rachel back home first, I need to leave now. Please keep me updated. Will do, Maria said, giving me a weak smile and a thumbs up. The smile didn't reach her sad, flat eyes, however. Rachel stayed oddly silent in the backseat, far unlike her usual chatty self. I pulled around the front of the school, turning back onto River Road to go back to the house. Internally, I felt frustrated and anxious about the time, but in my mind's eye, all I could see was the swollen dead woman with a face full of ebony spikes and eyes like black holes. I started driving back down River Road in the opposite direction, expecting to see some of the emergency vehicles having cleared out. But I was wrong. Now, in addition to about a dozen police cars and fire trucks scattered along the road, black SUVs identical to the ones I had seen at Rachel's school had also joined the fray. Scattered among the state troopers, a dozen men in dark suits wearing black sunglasses stood stiffly. Dad, what happened to Benny and Mark? Rachel asked, leaning forward in the backseat, her voice high and innocent. Are they in heaven? I hesitated for a long moment, stopping behind a line of cars as we waited for the flagger holding the faded stop sign. I really have no idea right now, I admitted, feeling a crushing weight on my chest. Your teacher seems to think that their mother had a mental breakdown. Do you know what a breakdown is, honey? Rachel put a thoughtful finger to her chin, her eyes half closed in childish thought. It's kind of like a nightmare, but when you're awake, right? She asked. I nodded, thinking to myself just how close that came to the core of the issue. It reminded me of how Jesus said the kingdom of heaven belonged to little children, because in a sense, their innocence seemed to sometimes allow them to see the absolute reality of something more than an adult ever could. Exactly, I said. Sometimes people hear voices or see things that aren't there. Sometimes they think their own family and friends are plotting against them, trying to murder them even. The human mind is a strange thing, Rachel. I hope you never have to see anything like that in your life. A lot of times, these things run in families, which we call genetics. There are diseases where the person keeps hallucinating in cycles for their whole life, which is called schizophrenia. And a lot of that is genetic. So if the mother and father are sick, then their kids are more likely to be sick too. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that. And a lot of time, it takes something traumatic to trigger the first signs of the sickness. And some people will never get it at all, even when other people in their family have it. It is a very weird thing. Rachel nodded knowingly, absorbing the information as she played with her tiny ears, pushing strands of blonde hair off her forehead. But we don't have it in our family, do we, Daddy? Rachel asked innocently, her blue eyes wide and curious. I thought back to my brother who had committed at the age of 21 during a psychotic episode. I had no idea what to say to her. Rachel had never met him, as he had died nearly a decade before her birth. I started to say, hesitating, when our conversation got abruptly interrupted due to a sharp knock on the passenger's side window. I nearly jumped out of my skin, my head ratcheting over to see who had snuck up on us like that. I saw one of the men in the dark suits with black sunglasses standing there, half bent over. He stood well over 6 feet tall, causing him to tower over my little sedan. Slightly unnerved, I rolled down the passenger side window, feeling the chill February breeze sweeping into the warm car. Sir, this road is about to close, he said in a tone as cold as the water in our town's reservoir this time of year. Glancing towards the beach, I saw that the woman's swollen corpse had disappeared, though now orange cones and yellow police tape covered the area instead. Please return directly to your home. This is a declared emergency zone as of 7:30 this morning. What? I hissed, narrowing my eyes. I must get to work. What do you mean the road is closed? Can I take a detour? He shook his head, his mirrored shades revealing nothing of his true feelings and thoughts. It gave me an eerie, unbalanced feeling, trying to read this man, yet getting nothing. Well, what do you expect me to do? I have to get to work. I have to pay my bills and feed my family. What kind of bullshit is this? I said, getting more upset by the moment. The man's face stayed expressionless and stony. Sir, do you have a residence nearby? The man asked, his tanned forehead furrowing slightly. I sighed, nodding. I live less than 5 minutes from here, I said. The last house on Maplewood Lane. Well, my name is Special Agent Erickson. I'm with the FBI. Those men over there, he motioned at a group of suited agents huddling in a circle, are from FEMA, the National Guard, and the Department of Homeland Security. Your entire town is a federal emergency zone. You need to go home immediately, sir. His tone became even colder. If you refuse to follow direct orders, you and your family can be detained by a military tribunal for a period not to exceed 6 months under Executive Order 717. Do you understand? My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles going white. I just nodded, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. The agent kept staring at me for a few interminable moments, then patted the car, nodded at me and stepped back. At that moment, the flagger turned his sign around from stop to slow. I rolled up the window, driving away without a single glance back. I needed to call my manager at work and let him know what the situation was. As soon as I turned back onto our little cul-de-sac, I pulled out my phone, flipping through the contacts until I found them. I pulled into our driveway, pressing the send button at the same moment. There was a long moment of silence. Then, a robotic female voice began reading a message.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Only emergency calls are allowed at this time. We apologize for the inconvenience. Please try again later.
There was a shrill beep. Then her message repeated. Sighing, I hung up and tried to send him a text message instead, but it kept returning as undelivered without even an automatic message in response. Oh my god, I hissed through gritted teeth, feeling more and more annoyed. I'd been signing up for all the overtime possible lately to get a hit on our bills. The mortgage took up nearly half of my paycheck right now, and a single unpaid day would make it significantly harder to get caught up this month. Daddy, it's gonna be okay, Rachel said, unbuckling herself and putting a small warm hand on my shoulder. You worry too much. Mommy always says so. Sighing heavily, I nodded, unbuckling myself and getting out. Rachel grabbed her pink backpack, bouncing along next to me as we ambled up the walkway to the front door. I had just grabbed the doorknob when someone nearby screamed, a high-pitched, bloody scream that reminded me of murder. Though this happened yesterday, and even though I'm safe now, even though I made it out of that hellhole, every time I close my eyes, I still hear a faint echo of that scream. It was like the starting bell for all the mayhem and nightmares that would follow. Most of the people I used to know from my town are dead now. I still can't really believe it. My neighbor, a woman in her mid-30s named April, came running down the street toward me and Rachel, bleeding from what looked like a dozen different stab wounds. Behind her, staggering and skipping down Maplewood Lane, her teenage daughter ran after her, a gleaming butcher knife held tightly in her right hand. Drops of blood continuously fell from the point. Help me! Oh Jesus! Help me! Someone! April screamed as her daughter caught up with her, raising the knife high above her head. With a demonic gleam in her eye, she wrapped one arm around April's neck, cutting off her wind and dragging her back off her feet. April nearly fell, but the girl held her mother up with superhuman strength. I know you're the one who's been doing it, her daughter hissed angrily in her ear, half screaming in rage. You've been poisoning my food. You've been cursing me when my back is turned. I saw that April's daughter had eyes that seemed entirely black, just like the drowned woman's eyes, except the blackness here seemed less total and opaque. "Rachel, stay back," I yelled, sprinting forward towards April, hoping to do something. "Go get your mother. Call the cops." But time seemed to slow down as I ran towards the bleeding woman, the distance stretching in front of me, as if space itself were twisting and distorting. I shouted something guttural, not even words, but just primal gibberish. April's daughter snapped to attention though, her gleaming eyes meeting mine, her insane grin stretching across her young, demented face. The knife started coming down in a blur, and I knew at that moment I would be too late. The blade smashed into April's chest, directly under her ribcage. A jet of blood erupted, the hidden arteries and veins spurting a crimson waterfall down her stomach, soaking her khaki pants instantly in a spreading stream. April's eyes rolled back in her head. She gave a small sound, just a faint "oh" of surprise and shock. A moment later, her legs crumpled underneath her. Her demonic daughter, soaked in the blood of her mother, pushed her forward, the limp body thudding wetly against the pavement. She stood above her, the knife clenched tightly in one hand, her knuckles turning white. I heard the front door open behind me, slamming against the wall with a crack. A second, much louder bang erupted a split second later. From the corner of my eye, I saw my wife aiming a worn revolver, shooting repeatedly. The demented daughter's head snapped back as a perfect circle appeared in the center of her forehead, trickling dark blood like black tears down her cheek. She fell forward onto her mother's still body, neither one of them moving or saying anything now. Elsie lowered the revolver, an old gun her father had left her with along with the rest of his possessions after his death. We had never needed to use it before, but at that moment, I felt immensely grateful that we always kept it loaded near the front door. I sprinted forward, reaching April and her daughter a few moments later, kneeling into the spreading puddle of blood underneath the two bodies. I pressed my fingers hard into April's neck, hoping to feel a pulse, but the skin, though warm, felt still. Sighing, shaking, feeling like I wanted to vomit, I repeated the process with her daughter, checking for a pulse and signs of breathing. Yet, noticing nothing, I glanced back at Elsie, who stood wide-eyed and uncertain in front of our open doorway. "Nothing," I whispered, shaking my head. "Call the cops, Elsie. I think they're both dead." "I already did," she answered, refusing to look away from the dead bodies laying crumpled in the center of our peaceful, quiet cul-de-sac. Screeching tires interrupted her as black SUVs and police cars speeding down River Road suddenly turned onto our small side street. A few minutes later, Special Agent Ellison stood in our living room, sipping a cup of hot coffee Elsie poured for him from the still steaming pot on the coffee maker. Two state troopers stood behind him like silent sentinels, their arms crossed, their faces revealing nothing. "Damn, that is quite a story," he said after I finished telling him everything that had happened, shaking his head in disbelief. "Something is very wrong with this town." Next to me, Elsie stared down at her cell phone, trying to pull up the news over and over with frustrated sighs, but the internet no longer worked. "Do you know why the internet and phone calls don't work anymore?" she asked Special Agent Ellison. He turned his tanned, stoic face in her direction, frowning slightly. "It's just a national security precaution for now, ma'am," he responded briskly. "Everything will be back to normal before you know it. We're just trying to prevent a national panic. The last thing we need is every news channel on the planet coming here and contaminating our crime scenes." "Why on earth would our little town cause a national panic?" I asked, disbelieving. "Look, I need to call my work and let them know what's going on." One of Erickson's eyebrows rose, staying stubbornly raised for the rest of our conversation. "I think you guys have slightly bigger problems right now," he whispered. "Look, we have more people coming to deal with the issue. You will definitely know more by the end of today. We just ask for a little cooperation and patience temporarily." I glanced out of the front window, seeing emergency workers surrounding the two still bodies in the center of Maplewood Lane. All I can say is this: stay in your homes. Don't go out for any reason right now. We will deal with this. The US government may be slow to awaken, but it's a true juggernaut once it starts moving. I repressed an urge to roll my eyes at that. Special Agent Ellison reached into his pocket, pulling out a business card. I took it, moving closer to Elsie so we could read it together. I expected to see his phone number, email, or other contact info, but the card only had a few lines in capitalized black letters. It read, FEMA Emergency Zone Precautions. Do not leave your home. Drink only bottled water. Cooperate with federal officials. Check for strange behavior in your friends and loved ones. Thank you for your cooperation. I frowned. What the hell does this even mean? Elsie asked, her expression an identical copy of mine. Agent Ellison gave her a wry smile, turning to leave. The state troopers followed closely behind him, still saying nothing. Someone will be with you by tonight, he said. They'll tell you everything you need to know. And don't try to leave town. All the roads are closed, and absolutely no one is allowed to pass without explicit federal permission. Without so much as goodbye, he slammed the front door shut behind him, striding briskly out into the center of the crime scene. We spent the rest of the day watching old movies in the living room with Rachel, since the lack of internet had also affected the television service. We waited for someone to show up and tell us what the hell had happened to our once peaceful town. At around midnight, we finally gave up and went to bed. No one ever came to explain anything to us. We didn't know it then, but the next day would turn out to be far worse, far bloodier and more horrible than I could ever comprehend. By the end of it, nearly everyone I knew in my town would lie dead or dying, and I would have enough nightmares to last me 1,000 years. As my wife Elsie stared hopelessly at her phone, my 5-year-old daughter, Rachel, came up behind me and put her arms around my waist, hugging me in a loving embrace. I felt her warm breath against my back, the slight shudders of anxiety and fear wrecking her tiny body. "It's going to be okay, Daddy," Rachel whispered, pushing her face into the small of my back. I stared blankly at Elsie, but she only lay there like a mannequin on the bed, her face shell-shocked and slack. An occasional explosion erupted out front as the two cars completed their transformation into a pile of twisted, blackened wreckage. "I know, baby," I said, turning back to Rachel and kneeling by her side. I put an arm around her neck, pulling her towards mine until our foreheads touched. The smell of her hair combined with her soft words eased just a bit of the dread, allowing me to think clearly again. "But what do we do now? I can't keep you two in this death trap of a town. This place is clearly too dangerous. Elsie, maybe we could stay with your mother." Elsie's apathetic mask cracked at that. She gave a short bark of laughter, her tear-filled eyes flashing up to meet mine. "How, Jay? How the hell do you expect us to get out of this town? All the roads are closed. Plus, the emergency alert explicitly said to stay in the house. We won't even get 5 minutes down the road before the cops stop us. We can't even use the water, which only leaves us 2 old bottles of soda in the basement and whatever orange juice is left in the fridge," she said, flinging herself out of the bed and striding over to the window. "We better start rationing the drinks, just in case we're in this for the long haul." "We could walk," I suggested. "It's only about 5 miles if we cut through Juniper Road." Juniper Road was a nearby dirt road, only wide enough for 1 car. Most of the year, it lay flooded, with potholes of water deep enough to sightline even a jeep. Kids around town took their ATVs up and down it during summer break. I knew that winding road continued all the way to the next town, where my mother-in-law lived. Though 5 miles was certainly an optimistic approximation. I thought that in reality, the entire trip from here to her mother's would be 7 or 8 miles in total. But I didn't want to say that aloud in this moment of tension. In a few moments, the barest skeleton of a plan had formed in my mind. Elsie rolled her eyes, her face clammy and covered with a thin film of sweat. In case you've forgotten, we have a little kid who can't exactly walk 5 or 6 miles. For God's sake, Jay, it's the middle of the night, and you don't think the cops blocked off that dirt road too? Everyone on our street knows about it. She retorted. Jesus, we were explicitly told by someone from the FBI not to leave the house under any circumstances. Are you just going to ignore that? What if we end up in some FEMA detention camp for 6 months? Who's going to take care of Rachel? You need to think about people other than yourself. I shrugged, thinking back to the last time I hiked down Juniper Road. I remembered that Juniper Road had several winding trails that curved through the woods, rejoining the road near the other end. In the mirror on the wall, I glimpsed Rachel jumping up and down slightly on the balls of her feet. Worrying doesn't help either, and you know I don't trust the damn government for a second, I whispered, clenching my fists. This is the US government we're talking about here. The same people who used Americans as guinea pigs during MK Ultra. These are the same people who used to inject random US citizens with radiation and LSD before torturing them, all in an insane attempt to control people's minds. These are the same people who invaded Iraq for absolutely no reason and killed over 1 million innocent people there. Why the hell should I listen to what they say when they don't give a damn about any of us? This might all be some sort of insane classified test, using our family and everyone else in this town as test subjects. Our lives mean nothing to those leeches in Washington. Elsie stared coldly at me, not responding. By the stoic expression on her face, I knew she refused to even consider my plan. Honey, we need to think about ourselves and Rachel right now. We can't save the world. We can't rescue the entire town. I'm not even sure if we can rescue ourselves at this point. I have to pee, Rachel interrupted, turning and leaving without waiting for a response. I sat down on the corner of the bed, watching the flaming wreckage outside. It had started to burn itself out already, the center of the carnage glowing red hot like the embers of a bonfire. I repressed an urge to laugh. Here we were, everything around us manifesting apocalyptic energy, and my daughter could only think about how much she had to use the bathroom. The suggestion made me realize that I too had to use the bathroom. I had been subconsciously holding it in since I woke up, but with the adrenaline now fading, the intensity of the urge grew rapidly. I rose, pushing myself up with a tired grunt. Elsie still stood at the window, watching the billowing clouds of black smoke rising into the starry sky. I'm gonna go check on Rachel, I said, striding out into the hallway. Just as I reached the closed bathroom door, a shrill scream from the other side shattered the silence. I nearly jumped out of my skin, my eyes widening in surprise. I slammed my fist against the wooden door, yelling at the top of my lungs. Waves of adrenaline sharpened my vision, making the lights seem brighter. Rachel? Rachel? What's wrong? I called. I heard Elsie's heavy steps coming up behind me, shaking the hallway floor as she ran towards us. At that moment, the electricity flickered. The lights overhead went out for a moment, came back on for a few racing heartbeats, and then died permanently, plunging us into darkness. I pulled my phone out, turning the flashlight app on. The lock on the other side of the bathroom door clicked open. I flung the door open, knocking Rachel back in the process. Her small body flew back against the wall, rattling the window. Elsie stood behind me in the doorway, staring at us with concern. Oh baby, I'm so sorry, I said, rushing forward to pick her up from the floor. Her dilated pupils stared endlessly past me. She didn't even seem to realize I was standing there for a few interminable seconds. Rachel? What's wrong? Why did you scream? Something was in the window, she whispered, her eyes finally focusing on mine in the dim room. Terror dripped from her young, high voice. Someone looked in at me when I was sitting on the toilet. I frowned, immediately turning my cell phone to face the sole window in the bathroom, shining it in a circle to check around the sides. But we were on the second floor, with only a sheer wall down to a row of rose bushes below us. Unless someone had angled a ladder over those and taken it back down before I rushed in here, it seemed impossible that Rachel's story could be true. I wondered if she might be manifesting some kind of PTSD from the stress of the last couple days. And then, the last rule on the phone came back to my mind. If any member of your household begins to show signs of hallucinations, psychosis, or delusions, lock them in a separate area immediately. Cease all interactions with the affected individual. I frowned, glancing back at Rachel. She still lay on the floor, her eyes glassy and unseeing, her mouth moving, but no sounds coming out. It seemed like her terrifying experience had knocked something loose in her pretty little head. I glanced behind me, seeing Elsie's stony face revealing nothing. What did the person look like? I asked. Rachel started crying softly, covering her face with trembling fingers. "It was the old woman from the beach, Daddy," she whispered through fast, panicked breaths. "The one with the black eyes and thorns in her skin. I would have remembered her face from anywhere. She just kind of floated there a few feet away from the window, her hair in a big circle around her head." I looked between Elsie and Rachel, 1,000 thoughts seeming to pass through my mind in an instant. Had Rachel been affected by some kind of contaminant? Some sort of toxic chemical or dangerous bacteria that caused people to hallucinate? And if she had, did that mean that the rest of us had contracted it as well? A horror scene flashed through my head. My wife, her hair wild and eyes black, drowning our baby girl in the bathtub, or me grabbing a butcher knife and slicing both of their throats wide open, before going into the attic and putting the barrel of my shotgun in my mouth. I shuddered, my heart feeling cold and constricted, but I quickly pushed those thoughts away. Elsie strode past me, throwing her arms around Rachel. She pulled her small body against her chest, embracing her tightly, rocking Rachel back and forth slightly. She whispered in her ear. "It's going to be okay," Elsie said, looking back at me knowingly. In that moment, I knew we both shared the same horrifying thought. "Maybe we should hide Rachel somewhere far away from any windows," I suggested, cringing inwardly at the deception. "Would that make you feel better, honey? We could put you in the basement for now." I knew the basement had a door whose lock could only be accessed from the outside, without the person in the basement being able to unlock it. When we first moved into the house, I joked with Elsie that the previous owners must have used it to lock kidnapping victims down there, like some modern version of the serial killer Gary Heidnik. "I don't want to be by myself, Daddy," Rachel said, frowning. "I think we should stay together." "She's right," Elsie said, staring deeply into Rachel's soft blue eyes. "We should stick together, and we should eat as much of the food as we can before it goes bad. How about we head downstairs for now?" Shrugging, I followed them down to the kitchen, checking every window on the way. The cars had fully burned themselves out. Further down the road, I glimpsed the outlines of 2 bodies heaped on the side of Maplewood Lane, the heaps that used to be my neighbors. Sighing, I watched Elsie pulling out cold cuts and mayonnaise to start making sandwiches. A pair of headlights sliced through the darkness outside, turning onto our little dead-end street from the main avenue. It ambled slowly forward, stopping for a moment in front of the bodies of April and her daughter before giving them a wide berth. It stopped, its engine idling as the passenger door opened and closed. It veered around the burned-out wreckage on the side of the road in front of our house before turning into our driveway. Squinting, I grabbed Elsie by the elbow, pointing through the dark house to the front window. "Someone's in our driveway," I hissed quietly into her ear. She nodded subtly. "I saw them come in," Elsie responded. Rachel stared out the windows, her eyes still looking glassy and glazed. I watched a tall silhouette emerge from the driver's seat, striding confidently up the walkway. The doorknob jiggled, but the lock kept it from turning. "Hello?" I asked through the doorway. "What do you want?" "Sir, I'm from FEMA. Please open your door and identify yourself." A deep, hoarse voice answered the other side. "You're on my property, sir," I replied sardonically. "How about you identify yourself, or have we somehow turned into North Korea while I was sleeping?" "I already did. I'm from FEMA, the man said without emotion, his voice staying measured and calm. My name is Dr. Kellen. I have my ID here if you want to see it. I looked through the sight lights on each side of the door, seeing the man holding up his wallet. A white card with the words, Federal Emergency Agent, Classification 9, barely visible through the thick shadows. Underneath that heading, a small picture and even smaller text continued. I can't read it, I said. Put it up to the window. The man sighed heavily. Sir, if you do not open this door immediately, you and your family are subject to arrest. Dr. Callan answered coldly. Your house is surrounded as we speak. We are clearing each residence street by street. Your actions are holding up our operation and compromising the safety of your town. Is that what you want? As if in confirmation of his words, I heard a rustling coming from the bushes around the house and heavy boots scraping across the concrete path behind the back door. But I refused to budge, knowing that I had locked all the doors and windows. Look, Dr. Kellen, I said skeptically, drawing out his name in a sarcastic tone. I called 911 and heard their list of rules. Where's your oxygen tank? Where's your military gear? You're supposed to have a badge with a silver skull on it. Because the rules have changed, he answered irritably. We tested the air in every area of this town, and it's fine. The contamination is only coming through the water. You haven't drunk the water, have you, Mr. Blackcomb? But since you insist, I will pull out the card so you can see the silver skull for yourself. Now, if you'll just look. Dr. Kellen fumbled in his wallet, but a shadow snuck up behind him. Something monstrous and coated in dried blood slouched through the rose bushes surrounding our home like the moat of a castle. I gave a sharp yell of surprise and terror, pointing through the sight lights, but Dr. Kellen couldn't see my movements through the thick wall of shadows. What did you say, Mr. Blackcomb? I flung the door open. Elsie had taken Rachel further back into the kitchen in an attempt to shield her from the conversation. I made a grab for Dr. Kellen, but he instinctively pulled away, his eyes widening as he regarded me like a madman. Behind you! I screamed, pointing at the human shape with black spikes coming from a dozen areas all over its body. It sped up with every step, creeping forwards and dragging one limp, bloody leg behind it. With mounting horror, I realized that I was looking at the form of my neighbor, April, who I had seen get stabbed to death by her own daughter. Her eyes had turned a shining ebony black. Hunched over, her blood-stained hands dragged across the grass. All the stab wounds had dark spikes protruding out, each of the needle-like grooves tightly clustered and pulsating in unison. From her slack open mouth, a sickly gurgle echoed out. She leapt through the air, landing on Dr. Kellen's back. Like a rabid animal, she snapped at the air, her jaws working furiously. Screaming, he spun furiously, his thin frame spiraling unsteadily as he moved from the concrete to the slippery wet grass of our lawn. His glasses flew off, shattering against the cement walkway. I stepped forward, trying to grab one of April's arms, but they writhed like snakes, twisting furiously around his neck. He frantically tried to throw her over his shoulder, but his energetic actions only succeeded in throwing off his balance even more. His right foot slipped forward, sending his legs flying cartoonishly up into the air. April kept her arms and hands wrapped tightly around him as her head snapped forward, her teeth sinking deeply into his neck. They landed heavily on the ground together, but April's grasp never seemed to loosen. "Help me!" Dr. Kellen shrieked at me through choking gasps, frantically clawing at the arms wrapping tightly around his neck. April's dead black eyes stared up at me as predatory as those of a cobra's. I ran forward, bringing my right foot back and kicking her in the nose with all my strength. If I'd been wearing steel-toe boots, I would have caved her skull in then and there. Sadly, however, I was wearing only the worn pair of carpet slippers that I wore to bed every night. I connected with April's head, hearing it snap back with a sickening crunch. A spray of crimson flew forwards in a semicircle from the ruptured skin of Dr. Kellen's neck. April still had the bloody wad of flesh in her half-open mouth. A pain like fire shot up my leg as my toes snapped like twigs against the hard bones of April's skull. She gave a guttural, demonic cry, her obsidian eyes flashing in a primal rage. I screamed with her, a mixture of surprise, agony, and adrenaline. Heavy footsteps came around the side of the house. Tears filled my eyes, causing my vision to become watery and distorted. But still, I instantly recognized the tall muscular form of Special Agent Ellison, even through the electric pain running up my leg. Limping backwards, I yelled out to him. "We need help!" I screamed. His dark, serious eyes flashed from me to the curled up form of Dr. Callan on the ground. Dr. Callan's black suit was covered in speckles of blood and mud, and he had one hand over his spurting neck, his mouth rapidly opening and closing even though no sounds came out. Last of all, Special Agent Ellison looked at the writhing, demonic creature that had once been my peaceful neighbor April. She had begun to recover, even though rivulets of black blood gushed out of her nose and many of her front teeth were broken or cracked from my kick to the center of her face. Her lips were pulled back in a wolfish snarl, revealing that even her tongue had started to turn black. She still had her left hand gripping Dr. Callan by his hair. Special Agent Ellison pulled out his service pistol, a silver 9mm Glock. He pushed quickly past me, putting the barrel of the gun to the front of April's forehead in a swift, smooth motion. "I'm sorry about this, ma'am," he whispered quickly, and his voice sounded sincere. She snapped her bloody jaws at his wrist like a rabid dog. Without hesitating, he pulled the trigger. The crack of the gunshot echoed down the still dark street. Her head exploded, black blood and bone fragments spraying the lawn in a macabre painting. April's hands relaxed, her neck falling back. Her gleaming ebony eyes half closed as what looked like peace finally descended upon her. Then, she stopped moving. For the second and final time, I saw my neighbor die. "Get inside the house!" Agent Ellison shrieked at me, the veins on his neck popping out, his eyes bulging out of his head. He pointed with the pistol at the front door. "There's more of them all over the place." Still holding the gun tightly in one hand, he grabbed Dr. Callan underneath the shoulders, half lifting him and dragging him backwards along the walkway. Dr. Callan grunted, his head swinging in limp circles, his eyes rolling back in his head, constantly looking in all directions for new threats. I quickly backed up into the house, watching the painful scene unfolding before me. "She bit me," Dr. Callan muttered as rivers of sweat ran down his chalk-white face. It looked like all the blood had drained out of his skin. The area around the bite mark on his neck still bled freely, but the ragged edges of torn flesh had already started darkening. A spreading patch of sickness emerging beneath the skin. "That bitch bit me. She bit me." "You're going to be okay," Agent Ellison whispered down at him as he pulled the limp man backwards through the open door. I slammed the door shut, turning the deadbolt. Seconds after I did, something heavy slammed against the other side, shaking it in its frame. Agent Ellison dropped Dr. Callan onto the hardwood floor, raising his gun and pointing it through the sidelight. "Hello?" A frail voice whispered from the other side. The voice sounded decayed and sickly, like the voice of a corpse choked with dirt and rocks. It barely registered, nearly as quiet as the wind, but it struck more fear into my heart than all the agonized screams of the last day. "Is this the house of Rachel Blackcomb? I've come to check on her." "Go away," I yelled through the door. Agent Ellison hissed at me, shaking his head violently. Laying on the ground, Dr. Callan groaned, moving his hands in random circles, pointing one trembling finger at me. "Be quiet, idiot," Agent Ellison warned. Rachel and Elsie slowly approached us from the kitchen, with Rachel wrapped tightly in my wife's arms. Only my daughter's terrified wide eyes could be seen over the hands that tried to protect her from the hellish things swarming across our town now. "I need to see Rachel," the decayed voice whispered, its words hissing and low. "Let me see the girl, the little girl." At that moment I realized I recognized the voice on the other side of the door. It was the voice of Rachel's teacher, Miss Nightingale. I glimpsed her silhouette on the other side, her clothes torn and bloody, her skin as pale as death. Beneath her gleaming eyes, an insane grin spread across her skeletal face. Then she withdrew, stepping back off the front steps and sliding quietly out of view into the bushes. "Look," Agent Erickson whispered confidentially to me and my family, glancing rapidly between me and Elsie. "This area is now out of our control. We've been going house to house, trying to get survivors out of town, but this is the last stop. We have lost control. Dozens of our people are already dead or transformed into those things. We found out that shooting them in the brain seems to kill them permanently, but otherwise, they seem to be almost immortal. The wounds they get before dying sprout fungal growths in the shape of spikes, and if those spikes pierce your skin, the infection gets into your blood. If they bite you, their infection gets into your blood. You don't want that stuff getting a foothold." He looked sadly at Dr. Kellen. In just the last few minutes, his health had worsened considerably. The black, circular outbreak around his neck wound extended from the bottom of his chin down to the top of his shirt. "Is it too late for him?" I asked. Agent Erickson nodded grimly. "He's as good as dead," he responded. "I don't know why I even bothered pulling him in here with us. It would have been far more merciful to just shoot him in the head. But it's hard, you know. It's fucking hard, man." He shook his head, and I could see he had started tearing up slightly. Blinking quickly, he pushed his sadness back into the shadows of his mind, out of view for the moment. "Keep it together, man," he whispered to himself. I put a hand on his shoulder, but he just brushed it away, refusing to meet my eyes. "We need to get out of here," Agent Erickson continued. "My SUV still works, but all the major roads are blocked off with wrecked cars, destroyed barricades, even burnt-out tanks. It's been like a war zone out there." "What about Juniper Road?" Elsie asked hopefully. Agent Erickson looked blankly at her, so she explained about the dirt road that potentially led to freedom. He nodded thoughtfully, continuously looking out the sight lights for any sign of new problems. I heard constant rustling from all around the house, the snapping of twigs and leaves, the muted shuffling of feet, even low whispers that seemed to bleed into the murmuring wind. "I keep hearing people," I told Agent Erickson confidentially. He just shrugged, looking undisturbed by the news. "Yeah, this whole area is infested. Before we lost contact with Central Command, they told us satellites showed hundreds of infected moving through the surrounding woods. Do you guys have any firearms?" he asked. Elsie nodded, pulling her revolver out of a hip holster hidden under her loose nightgown. I hadn't even realized that she went to bed with it on, but seeing it now, I felt thankful that she did. "We only have 10 or 11 bullets left though," Elsie reminded me. "We're not really big gun people, you see. It was my father's old gun. He gave it to me before he died, but I only had 1 box of bullets." Agent Erickson leaned towards us. "Okay, here's the plan. We're going to run out to my car. I'll take the front, and Elsie, you take the back. You two," he gestured at me and Rachel. "Stay between us. Elsie, if you see anything move, shoot it without hesitation. We can drive out of town on that dirt road, God willing. If it's blocked off further down, we just drive as far as we can and run the rest of the way." I felt a small ray of hope that we might escape with our lives. "Okay, but what about the doctor?" I asked, gently nudging Dr. Kellen with my foot. But I never got to finish my thought. At that moment, the glass door in the back of the kitchen smashed inwards. Human shapes separated from the shadows, hunched and twisted, sprinting in our direction like the hungry predators they were. Everything descended into chaos as we bolted out the front door in the direction of the SUV. Dr. Kellen sat up in front of me, partially blocking the door. Elsie jumped over him, staying close behind Agent Erickson and pulling Rachel quickly forward by her left wrist. I leapt over Dr. Kellen's shaking legs, but a hand grabbed my ankle, sending me falling heavily onto the cement walkway. "Don't leave me," Dr. Kellen whispered hoarsely. I looked back, seeing him grabbing my leg with both hands. His glazed eyes looked manic, even delusional. I tried kicking at him, swinging my fist at his face. It connected with a meaty thud, but his grip never loosened. "Let me go, you idiot," I pleaded. Elsie, realizing that I had fallen behind, let go of Rachel and took a few steps back in my direction. She raised her revolver, aiming it at Dr. Kellen's head and firing. The first bullet pierced his chest. Blood sprayed from his racing heart. His eyes widened in shock as he raised his trembling hands to the wound. I started crawling forward, pushing myself up, but a heavy weight landed on my back. Half standing, I spun around, shrieking in frustration and rage. Elsie closed one eye, shooting again in a rapid burst. I heard one bullet whiz right next to my head, the air erupting into a sonic boom as bone splinters and warm blood covered the side of my face. The next bullet smashed into my left shoulder, going through the bone and erupting out the back of my body, where it continued into Dr. Kellen's neck. Gurgling on his own blood, he fell back, having lost all of his strength. I cried in shock. The wound felt freezing cold, and for a few moments, I hadn't even realized that I had been shot at all. There was very little pain, just a feeling like someone had punched me hard in the shoulder and given me a numb arm. Agent Erickson had reached the SUV, flinging open the driver's side door and throwing Rachel into it. I saw her comically wide mouth formed into a perfect O. Saw him rapidly motioning me forward with his left hand as he started the engine. "Come on, Jay," Elsie cried, reaching her arms out towards me. I stumbled forward, hearing heavy footsteps all around us. Forms emerged from the shadows. I saw the face of the old lady who had drowned in the reservoir. From the other side, Miss Nightingale shuffled forward on all fours, nightmarish spikes emerging from deep wounds carved into the side of her chest and back. "Run, Elsie," I whispered. Everything felt unreal, like a dream. She turned, firing at Miss Nightingale, but at the same moment, the old woman leapt on Elsie's back. Miss Nightingale's head snapped violently back, her limp body falling in slow motion. Elsie spun, trying to throw the corpse of the old lady off, but her long skeletal fingers reached for Elsie's eye sockets. Elsie shrieked in pain. I tried to grab the old woman, to throw her off, but with only one working arm, it was impossible. Rapidly losing blood, my vision glazing over with white light, I watched in horror as the old woman bit my wife over and over, snapping off a piece of her ear before ripping into her right cheek. She dug blindly at Elsie's eyes, causing blood to dribble out of the destroyed orbs. Elsie's skull exploded as a series of gunshots pierced the chaos. Uncomprehendingly, I looked over at Agent Erickson, seeing the smoking pistol in his extended hand. He kept firing until both my wife and the old woman lay still on the lawn. The blades of grass smeared with steaming drops of blood. Dozens more silhouettes emerged from the surrounding forest, coming down the road or from the back of the house. The noise and bloodshed seemed to draw them like moths to a flame. Feeling numb, I stumbled forward to the car. Agent Erickson flung open the door before throwing me bodily into the backseat. I heard Rachel's horrified sobs from the front, heard his heavy breathing. He put the car in reverse, backing out of our driveway and accelerating away. Bodies with black, shining eyes emerged from surrounding houses, from behind bushes and trees. Agent Erickson ran over any who tried to block our way, the heavy bodies splattering against the pavement. We reached Juniper Road in silence. A few dead bodies littered it. A couple burned-out police cars hugged the sides. But in silence, we drove around them, leaving the ruined town behind forever. As we reached the border, dozens of jets flew overhead. A moment later, we saw bright flashes of fire from the town. The US government had started to destroy all evidence of the horrors that had occurred there. "We don't need a national panic starting," Agent Erickson told me as we headed to the state police barracks, where he claimed our town's few survivors were being gathered and given medical aid. We turned off Juniper Road. Rachel still wouldn't speak a word. She only stared back with dread at the town where she grew up, her eyes looking dead and hopeless. holding her arms protectively across her small body. More jets flew overhead, dropping another series of bombs, destroying the corpse of her mother. But not the memories of her sacrifice for us.